Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. We'll do the housekeeping to start with. I would advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. And I would advise anyone in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. And I would remind anyone in the gallery that it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So, item 1 on the agenda is apologies. We have an apology from Gary. I'm not aware of any other apologies. I think Cara is waiting to join online and is possibly just waiting for a link or a technical issue there with that. So hopefully Cara will be on soon. So item 2 then on the agenda, members, is chairperson's business. There's a few bits and pieces here, hopefully nothing that'll take too long. So you have tabled a note of yesterday's informal meeting with NACOA, which is an organisation that supports children who have a parent who is drinking too much. And that was a briefing that had been proposed by Cara in relation to some of the educational challenges that home scenario would pose. So it was a really helpful briefing actually, and I would suggest that we might want to share the briefing with DE and SIA and ask them both if they have any avenues that they could possibly pursue to make schools and indeed pupils aware of the support and the resources provided. They did reference they provide quite a lot of teacher training materials and curriculum resources, so again that's something that the department might be able to take forward through the curriculum review if members are agreed on that. I think there was also a suggestion that we might want to share their briefing materials with our colleagues on the Health Committee, as they were focusing quite a lot on the public health aspect of their work, and I think would be keen to get some wider engagement in Northern Ireland around that. Again, if members are agreed, we share that. Great. There is a letter in there under chairperson's business from a parent in relation to the CAG testing. I'm just going to suggest we just deal with that at correspondence rather than taking that right at the top of the meeting. A couple of other issues then is we have had quite a lot of, and the clerk had asked me just to highlight, we have had quite a lot of replies through on the committee bill, so there is clearly a fair bit of interest still on that issue. So we currently have scheduled briefings in terms of the evidence that we're planning to take from both the Youth Assembly and the Children's Commissioner. Is there anybody else at this stage, any other particular stakeholders that members would want to suggest that we would like to hear from, so we are getting quite congested already in our forward work plan, so if there's anyone wants to propose today or through the clerk over the next number of weeks, I think the quicker we can get ahead of those evidence sessions, the better chance we have of getting through all the processes in good time. Is there anybody that wants to suggest anything at this stage, or are we happy to go through the clerk on that? Through the clerk at this stage. Okay. Next item is very briefly on the RSE inquiry. We have had the draft report circulated, so it's just again to remind members to share feedback with the clerk in relation to any edits or changes that would be proposed by members to that, so that a final draft could be brought forward for members' consideration. Again, I think the sooner we can get to that point the better. I'm still living in hope we can reach consensus with some recommendations, so again I think any feedback that members can bring around recommendations that they believe would attract consensus, or any particular issues from a party political perspective that any member wishes to be noted in the report that was a preferred recommendation from their party's perspective but that may not get consensus, or a particular issue that a party may want to make clear was a red line for them on that. I think given the nature of the issue, it's important that stuff's captured, and I would be keen to see that done explicitly, and if we're going to reach consensus, I think probably that is the way to do it. Unless anybody has anything to add at this stage, it is really just a reminder and encouragement to go through the clerk for that. No other contributions, that's grand. I had one other item I wanted to raise, and it was really just arising from media today in terms of reporting from the BBC, and I think with having the unions in today it is likely to attract some discussion, and it was just to make another mention to budget issues. So I've seen that we've had a further correspondence has gone out from the Acting Permanent Secretary in the Department again, just in relation to that encouragement to schools to exercise budgetary restraint, and I think we're likely to hear from unions today in terms of a bit of frustration around that, particularly being told not minimise utilisation of sub-teachers and not to be making any unnecessary appointments. I think all members would agree when you go out to visit schools, there's no sense that I'm certainly picking up of profligate spending of sub-teachers being engaged unnecessarily or teachers being employed unnecessarily. My sense is principals act responsibly and that classes need to be taught and they need to be covered. I would want to be clear that I think it is, of course, absolutely everybody's responsibility to deal with public money responsibly, and absolutely anybody who is entrusted with that role should be doing so. But I have to say I am a bit concerned about the lack of commentary that I'm hearing from the Minister around what is proactively being done at departmental level to address the budget shortfall, and it is an unprecedented budget shortfall that we're looking at in education. And I've not heard anything around some of the structural challenges that exist in education. And I think we hear so much commentary around that in health, around the need for transformation, but I'm not hearing that in terms of any responsibility that might sit at ministerial or departmental level to deal with the structural issues in our system that drive the spend. So I suppose really without taking up any further time, I think as we are moving into the public consultation phase on the budget, and we are clearly facing challenges on how we are going to reach agreement around budgets, I would like to get correspondence to the Minister to ask what is his agenda for transformation within education to deliver services at them in the most affordable way, and has he identified any structural aspects of our system that can be addressed to deliver the system more efficiently. I think we have very clear recommendations in the independent review, particularly around the size of the school estate, and I've seen no evidence of any discussion around that. So I'm happy to open that up to members. If there is agreement that we do seek that written clarification from the Minister, I would be keen to take that forward. I think it would help inform the committee's consideration around budget. But I did feel it was important to note, as I have no doubt we'll hear frustration from teaching unions today about that ask around restraint at school level when schools are often starting in deficit before they even begin the academic year. So I'll put it out there if there's any views anyone wants to communicate. Deputy Chair,
happy to support that proposal, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. David, did you want to come in?
Chair, I have no problem in terms of writing to the Minister in terms of the queries that you wish to make. I would just say that I think that it's regrettable, but it's a position that I feel that the Department and the Minister has been put in, that he has to notify the schools in this way. He has spoken very clearly that the budget has been proposed to be catastrophic for his department, for schools here and for education in Northern Ireland as a whole. He's been very clear in that, and I think he has to appropriately communicate that to schools. It doesn't mean that he thinks that's satisfactory, quite the opposite, and he's outlined that, and you may well have queries around other things you may want to ask, but around the chamber, around this room, we've often heard, and politicians across the board are guilty of it, I'm not trying to play a huge amount of politics with this, but of people talking about things that they would aspire to have added to our school system. What we see under the proposed budget is that the very basics we would struggle to provide unless something serious is done around the budget. Now I understand, and that might seem like I'm pushing back, and to a certain degree I am, towards Finance Minister, but we all understand as well that it's not just the division of the pie is not big enough. So I respect that as well, but I do think that the Minister has to be realistic with schools around the position that he's in. Doesn't mean decisions that he would want to take, but he may have to take if he's left with a budget that's not sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to respond to that and very briefly, I mean, I absolutely understand that, it would be, nobody here would want to stand over school principals, wasting money at all. I think that the difficulty comes when the pressure, from my perspective, is applied consistently at school leader level and school level. But we haven't heard that messaging from the department around what are the structural issues within our system that drive some of the financial pressures. Of course, we need more money, we need more investment in education, but I think there's a transformation aspect to this that I just haven't heard that strategic vision being set out, and I would like to hear that, because I think it feeds into the budget setting process. Any other members want to come in, or are we content with that proposal? Agreed. Okay, item 3 in the agenda then is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations on any items on the agenda today? No. If that should change, as usual, do indicate just through the clerk so we can get that noted. So, matters arising. One matter arising from me, which is just to draw members' attention to the Assembly research paper, which was provided around some of the statistics and the service delivery background around special educational needs. So it addresses, to my mind, really effectively a lot of the queries that have been raised throughout the inquiry, and have done a fair bit of back and forth around some of that sort of statistical data and research element to this. this. I have to say I would want to put on record to the team at Raise, I really do appreciate the work they've done. I think it's an excellent paper, and I think it will be very helpful for members in terms of our thinking as we draw the inquiry closer to a close. Happy if members, once they've had time to digest it, because I appreciate it's a big document, want to bring anything back next week for further discussions. But other than that, I would want to propose that we note it and add that to the committee inquiry papers if we're agreed. Agreed. Okay, any other matters arising? Michelle, did you want to come in there?
Thank you. I just thought it was worth raising a response I received from the Minister this week requesting an update on SEND placements. So in the response it said that they needed to create 950 additional places, and at this stage now in January they have initiated 350, so that's quite a gap, and it's concerning to think that there might be another crisis in terms of SEND placements coming down the line. So what I was hoping is that perhaps as a committee we might write to the Minister and request that he would come to the Chamber and make a statement on that. I think that was something that was lacking last year in the crisis. I think this is an issue that all constituencies deal with, all MLAs deal with, and I think it would be appropriate to have the opportunity to question the Minister on it in the Chamber.
Certainly something I'm happy to support. Any other views from other members? You agreed? Agreed?
Well, just out of interest, Thomas told us he would have it all sorted by June. Have you remember?
Right, yes, yeah. We'll watch this space. No, that's fine. So the proposal is then to write to the Minister and to set out the committee position that a statement to the Assembly would be appropriate, and given where we are with this. And I do think it has been mentioned before, we had very, very clearly set out by the EA, end of October was the sort of line in the sand that they delivered to say if we're not sort of clear where we are at that point, then we are in difficult territory, and we're well past that, and I haven't heard any particular update beyond that, so I think that would be appropriate. Okay, so that closes matters arising if there's nothing else from any other members. So item 5 on the agenda is draft minutes. So I'd refer members to the draft minutes of the Education Committee meeting of the 7th of January. That's at page 8. Can I get agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, that takes us to item 6 on the agenda. So this is a briefing on the General Teaching Council Bill. It's an oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Teaching Council, which represent the main teaching unions in Northern Ireland. So I would refer members to the clerk's brief at page 16, and a Hansard report of the DE pre-legislative briefing, which is at page 18 of your packs, and members should all have a copy of the bill there in front of them. So just while witnesses are seated there, I would just suggest to members that the first part of the briefing, if we will be happy to take evidence on the General Teaching Council Bill, and then once we've concluded that, if time permits, as we have the representatives from the unions here, there may well be wider issues in the education system that we want to put some questions to the members, to the witnesses. So I'm happy to give members time to do that if we're still on track at that stage in terms of time. So before we start the briefing, it falls to me to welcome all of you to committee today. So joining us today we have Justin McCamphill from NASUT, we have Mark McTaggart from INTO, Stephen McCord from UTU, Joanne Whyte from NEHT, and Bronagh Wright from NEU. Hopefully everybody's names there, and if anyone wants to add anything to their intros, feel free to do so. So I think at this stage, you've all been here before. I don't need to go through the format in any great level of detail. Happy to hand over for any initial remarks that you want to make, up to 10 minutes in relation to the bill, but if there's anything then that you want to add in terms of the more general landscape in terms of education and the issues that are relevant to your members, please feel free to do so. We'll take questions after that, first on the bill, and then to broaden out, time permitting. So thank you all for joining us, and I'll hand over. I don't know who will be opening up.
Can I just start by apologising for us not having a briefing paper for you? Obviously we were kind of fixated on other issues this week with getting our pay offer and going out to our members and getting that received, so we don't have the briefing paper, but obviously we will be passing the briefing paper on at a later date, so apologies for that. So I'll hand over to Justin.
Okay, and thank you very much, Chair, for the invite. So just want to start by saying I'm going to give evidence on behalf of the NITC in as much as possible. We exist as the negotiating body for teachers in relation to pay and conditions, but there might be some areas when it comes to policy things where we might diverge slightly. So just to say, if I get it wrong, where everyone is, just we only did get the invite a few days ago. But so just to say though, overall though, the NITC as a whole, we support the concept of an independent professional body for teachers, but that's not what's in this legislation. We believe it is regrettable that the situation was allowed to persist for over 20 years, where everyone knew the legislation was flawed, and we knew it prevented it from regulating the profession in the manner originally intended. And I think maybe when you're a body and it wasn't doing what it was meant to do, that's almost part of the reason for the dysfunction that was there before, but I'm not really going to delve into it. We believe legislation's necessary because there are safeguarding risks for young children, young people, if it doesn't happen. But we also think there's more than one way of achieving this policy objective. We agree that whatever approach is taken, the core functions, as highlighted in the legislation, though, are required. So we do need to establish and maintain a register of teachers. We do need to approve qualifications for the purpose of registration, and we do need to regulate the teaching profession. The reality is at the moment that the current GTC is operating directly under the direction of the department in a more effective way than in its previous manifestations. And I think that is regrettable when you think back on the past. However, the NITC believe that as drafted, this bill will still leave the GTC operating under the direction of the Minister, and therefore it will not be independent or representative of the profession. Already, teachers ask why they have to pay for a body which isn't fully functional, and I think they will find it hard to stomach paying for a non-departmental government body in future. Calling it a council is giving the impression that it will have some sort of decision-making powers when it will have nothing of the sort. The draft legislation is unambiguous. The new GTC&I simply carries out the wishes of the Minister. And if this committee believes that this is the way to go, then at the very least you should remove the requirement for teachers to pay for it. Just to run through the different clauses to give our views. So I suppose if we had an independent body, we would agree with the requirement to remove people from certain groups, certain interests, but we think there's some nuances around that. I think we had an issue certainly with employer reps and those type of people being on a professional body for teachers, because that isn't what happens in other bodies. I think we have a range of views though among ourselves as to whether teachers would just be elected generally or come from different groups like primary, post-primary, special, etc. So I think we have a range of views on that. We do profoundly disagree with the removal of elections. In most other professional bodies, half are appointed and half are elected. This legislation would remove that entirely. And I know the argument used is, well, teachers elected the wrong people, but I don't think that's a good argument, to be honest. In terms of clauses 2 to 4, they don't seem contentious. They're allowing GTC to make provisions around its own rules. In relation to clause 5, I would be cautious about how far GTC&I is allowed to delegate its functions within the organisation without referral to the board. Clause 6 is a schedule that allows GTC&I to remunerate its members. We do believe people who give up their time should get out-of-pocket expenses. If a teacher is appointed, substitute cover would be provided already at the full rate for a public appointment. So therefore, we don't believe it's necessary to provide payments for people who be on this body. In relation to clause 7, which clarifies that the department has the power to make regulations relating to the registration of teachers, I think that is needed. So, for example, GTC&I could provisionally register persons with minor deficiencies, because as unions we're all aware of people coming from other jurisdictions who maybe fall a couple of weeks short in terms of the time they've had under supervised placement, and I think an agreed system in place that would allow that to be rectified is good. Clause 8 is more problematic, as we don't know what mechanism GTC&I would use in future for the re-registration of teachers. We know other professional bodies have systems where members of the body would provide a sample of professional learning work. We would want clarity that that would be distinct from the employment relationship. So I think there is a fear, and maybe unfounded, that it could be your employer that could be making that decision when it should be your professional body. And I think because it is a bit open-ended in terms of what might happen, we would prefer having that clarity first. It's our view that teachers already do submit records of continuing professional development for their employer through a scheme called PRSD, and we do think that same information could be used for a professional body, but obviously the decision making would have to lie separately. Clause 9, we think it's interesting because it gives the department the power to set out in regulations any matter relating to the registration of teachers that will be required or authorised to include in its rules. And I'm saying that's interesting because it's making clear GTC&I is entirely subservient to the department. And if this is the case, it's not morally justified to ask teachers to pay for it. In terms of Clause 10, it's the one about the penalties if you pretend to be a teacher. There's no issue with that. Clause 11, we think, is a big change from the current position. It's about the type of cases that GTC can look at, and we know there's going to be challenges around that. But I think it is important, especially when it comes to very serious disciplinary matters where somebody would have been dismissed, that there is a look at is the person capable, or should they be allowed to teach. I think the one on competency issues, again, can be very difficult sometimes. Sometimes people can be judged incompetent for reasons maybe beyond their control, medical reasons, etc. I know it's not covered in the legislation, and I know it's dependent on subsequent regulation, but it's something I would like some information on as to how that would work. Clause 12 is in relation to the charges, and we believe those charges should be removed, because with the Clause 11, which is widening the scope, in conjunction with the fact that it's all going to be directed by the department, we think we could end up in a situation where fees do escalate out of control for a body that's carrying out functions for the department. The rest of it, Clause 13, no issues. And again, in terms of the rest of it, there's no issues with Clause 14, 15 or 16 and how the order's defined or named. So overall, that's, I think, if anyone maybe wants to think of maybe missed something, but if it's not an independent body, we don't believe teachers should pay for it.
Thank you. Any other of the witnesses want to come in at this stage? We're happy to move to questions. Okay. Look, I'll make a start at the start of the bill, and it's that issue around election or appointment. So understand the concerns around ensuring that the council is actually representative of the teaching profession. When we heard from the department, they were quite clear, and certainly through my own engagement with educational stakeholders, that there has been a sense that the previous iteration of the council sort of ground to a halt effectively, because it effectively became an industrial relations forum rather than the professional body regulating the teaching profession. Would you have any concerns that if there was a push for an elected model that we could just recreate the problems of the past, or is there any way you can see through that?
I think the only way you would get around it would be in the context of an independent body, and I think that will involve taking a step back and looking at how independent bodies for other professions work. I think in the past we looked at Scotland, and Scotland has a very successful body, but it's one that's been in the firmament of the Scottish education system for so long that I don't think you could actually just create it overnight, and I think that's what we tried to do. Whereas I think we should have been looking at other professional bodies, law society, barristers, pharmacists, etc., engineers, what they do, which tends to be smaller bodies where the people who are there from the public and the public interest hold to account those who are elected. Whereas I think GTC got it the other way around. People who were maybe coming from the employer type perspective were pushing the work, and the elected people were criticising them, sometimes very loudly. Whereas I think it should have been the other way. They should have been saying, guys, this is your job to develop these competencies for teachers. We're here to make sure you do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bronagh, yeah.
It's very, very important that the body reflects the service that it's standing up for and it's accountable to. So those people need to be from across the whole education sector in Northern Ireland to be able to, confidently and, with trust represent those sectors. So I think that's where we haven't had in the past, and that is a very, very important element of this, especially for, the area I'm interested with young people underachieving and teachers who are working in that area. So I think it's very important that the body reflects the education systems and services across Northern Ireland.
Would your assessment be that an elected body from the teacher side would be more representative than a body that arose from appointment? Would that be a clear position?
Yeah.
Yes.
But again, it would only work within the context of an independent body, because if your only role on the body is to implement the will of the department, it's actually not really going to matter how you've appointed them. So I think the bigger thing is the independence of the body.
I suppose that I'll ask maybe a wider question arising from this discussion. Is there a fundamental concern with the premise of this legislation?
Yeah.
You think that the Minister should have essentially done something different? He should have created
He should either
an
have done
body and not tweak the structures we have.
We think he should have. He had different options open to him. He could have gone for the independent body route, or I suppose he could have. The department could have done it themselves. Could have got, and that's not what we'd want. Or you could have some sort of agency. But whatever way he picks, there obviously should still then be consultation, listening to the profession. But the current body, it doesn't add up that you can say it's, and to be fair, they're not saying it's independent, but it should be.
Those are issues we can pick up with the department when we hear from them. I wanted just to pick up, I think, a number of clauses. You highlighted this, but Clause 9 and Clause 11 in particular, you'd highlighted some concerns. Clause 9, very open-ended. Effectively, the department can require the council to do anything it wishes in future regulations. So I think I'd probably just note that at that stage. That is certainly something I would want to raise with them, of what they actually foresee, the sort of things they may be requiring the council to do that might arise out of Clause 9, and would it not be better to put that on the face of the bill and be transparent about it, would be my first question. Clause 11 did raise some concerns with me, and I wanted just to hear in a wee bit more detail from you on that. It sets out this quite detailed schedule of investigatory and disciplinary powers that'll be conferred on the GTCNI, but the schedule itself is worded to say that these provisions may be provided for by regulations. Does that create a lack of clarity as to whether these actually are going to be the powers?
I know the department's argument is that they're saying they're future-proofing it, but I think while I can get that from a procedural point of view, I think the profession does deserve clarity as to what it's going to be.
And I think maybe the flip side to that, which is a similar, it is two sides of the same coin, I guess. We could potentially have this new body established without its investigatory or disciplinary powers being clarified, which creates uncertainty as well, which I think is helpful.
If you look at the lesson of the past, because it never got to the regulating, it ended up with the two easy bits, and it still made a hames of it, so that's what we had 20 years of, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I think across the committee there'll be certainly a strong interest in getting this right, because it goes so wrong previously. So I think it's important that we do consider this in detail. Look, I'll maybe come back in at the end if there's anything that I wanted to raise that isn't covered by other members. But I'll pass over to the deputy chair, and if other members want to indicate through the clerk who are interested in coming in, I'll pass over to the deputy chair.
Thanks, Chair. The Education Minister has been keen to link this proposed new GTC with teacher professional learning, and Alan Boyd from the department said the bill will provide a power allowing for the periodic revalidation of every teacher's registration with the GTCNI. That will require all teachers to demonstrate periodically their continuing participation in teacher professional learning. So what are the teaching unions' views on this? Is there a workload implication, and has the department engaged with the unions on this?
They have engaged, but they haven't outlined exactly what that might look like. Because you could say there's a model that takes the existing PRSD model that's already happening, and that would be relatively workload free. But there also could be something new that teachers would have no control over. And it could range from, if you look at the language, it does say participation. So that implies somebody's going to have to provide. And I think, we don't want a situation where teachers are being legislated to take part in something that their employer's not providing. And I know in other models, in other jurisdictions, it is in the contract, it's built in that this is within contractual time and the resources are provided. So we've no objection to teachers taking part in teacher professional learning. You need to reflect on your practice as a teacher, but it has to be done in such a way that the work's manageable and shouldn't be open-ended and should be split from the employer's function.
It also needs to be relevant. There's a whole programme of TPL being rolled out at the minute from the department, and as a principal in my school, none of it so far is something where I've thought, must get everyone to do that. There's a whole programme of TPL available in my school, as would be in every other school, but it's relevant to the school and the children that they serve. It's not relevant perhaps to what someone else thinks educationists should be. And my concern, our concern about it would be that it would become a ticky box exercise where you have people spending their professional time watching videos or attending things that are actually not relevant or appropriate for their practice in their school. So we would like to see that much better explained. We do think that there should be a connection, of course, but what actually does that mean? If you've attended every meeting and every training available in your school that year, does that mean that's okay?
And are you saying there's a lot of TPL available that actually isn't relevant to the job the teacher's doing?
It might be relevant to some people in some schools, but it wouldn't be relevant to all. So, in my context, there hasn't been anything offered yet that, is relevant. And what we have looked to do hasn't been offered within EA or any of the department's offerings. So I think that really needs to be narrowed down, because there would be nothing worse than expecting people to waste their time on something that they're not going to use or not going to benefit the children that they teach.
And if it is the case that some of the TPL isn't relevant, and therefore a teacher decides there's no point doing it, does that affect their career pathway?
Well, you wouldn't like to think so, because I think it should be up to the school that the teacher works in to decide what is relevant and what their TPL will be. There's obviously, through PRSD, teachers can come and say, I have an interest in this, I would really like to go and do this, and that would be considered their personal target in their PRSD. And so you get people going down all different alleyways that in the end is going to broaden what you can offer in your school, but that's a personal interest of theirs. But if instead of doing that, they're having to do something about, teaching French at Key Stage 2, because that is the TPL offering, the official TPL offering at that time.
Box by doing it.
Yeah, waste of time.
I think, Pat, one of the issues is going to be the bureaucracy that would be required.
Yeah.
And that, again, comes back to the issue of then of what the fee structure would end up look like. Because there's simple ways of doing it. You could have samples, etc. But then you also could have, a bureaucracy where somebody's checking on every person. And then the next thing you have 20 people employed just to keep an eye on teachers. And, that's not what we want. And again, we make the point, if this is all going to be directed by the Minister, teachers shouldn't have to pay for it.
Yeah, I think in terms of TPL as well, it's who's going to deliver it. It's going to be very important, because teachers have to feel that it's already said, it has to be relevant, but it has to be effective for them as well. When EA came in first, there was a huge amount of professional development available, but that was cut back and cut back and cut back. So there's no longer, the EA's function isn't as much now of delivering training for teachers. So what schools are now being asked to do is go outside to look for people to come in. So you're going to be trying to figure out what qualifications they are. And where a school sometimes hasn't been able to deliver TPL, there's a danger that teachers through this scheme will be negatively impacted because the training that was necessary isn't available. And then when it comes down to looking at things, those teachers won't have in their whatever it is, a folder or whatever, saying I've had my TPL and it has been delivered properly. So there's an issue here with who's going to fund that, because when we're already being told, and from the letters that came out this week from Ronnie Armour, not to be bringing substitute teachers or supply teachers in. So when are teachers expected to do it? Will it be within their direct time, or will teachers be expected to do this outside their teaching time or outside their working time? So there are a number of issues there. And until that has been agreed with the trade union, I think we're going to have to be very, very much conscious of the fact that TPL has to be effective, but it also has to be funded properly.
Yeah. Just one other question. As an MLA, I've made representations on behalf of a number of young, newly qualified teachers who are having difficulty getting registered because they qualified either in the south or across the water. And I'm wondering if you're familiar with those cases in general, and would the unions be supportive of an amendment to this legislation which would remove barriers to recognition of qualifications?
And it's something that they've got better at, but still isn't perfect. And I think one of the issues is the local institutions are pre-approved, whereas if you're coming from somewhere else, you're asked to prove almost after you've got your qualification that it meets the requirements. I mean, as a union, we know where the institutions outside of here, send us young people from. GTC know that too. They'll know the top 10 institutions, and we do think they should be looking at, pre-approving those courses, so that at least you're only left with a small number of institutions to deal with. I mean, the reality is, in terms of external providers, the majority, are in the northwest of England, and so it should be easy, well, I would think, to speak to those institutions, and of courses don't change year on year, to make it quick to approve them.
I think there should be a little bit of caution around some things that are happening at the minute. When we look at teacher training over in England and perhaps in other countries, I think in Northern Ireland we have a very high standard here of what's happening, and I do think there needs to be accountability for those that are coming to teach and want to teach in Northern Ireland. I think that is very important, and it should be regulated so that we're not diffusing, excellence within subject areas or, within certain sectors where teachers are working. So that is a very important thing to think about.
Alluding to the international PGC model, the Coventry model, is that something that would be concern among your members?
Yeah. And we do have a concern that that came in with very little prior warning. That's for anyone who doesn't know, there's an international PGCE offered in 4 universities in England that was originally intended for students who were going to go and work abroad. For some reason, it's been allowed in Northern Ireland, and now they're marketing themselves as teacher training providers for Northern Ireland, and I think that came about without any proper, consultation with the profession here. The Scottish GTC decided not to allow them. So we're not talking about the traditional universities in England, it's those who are doing it online, and I think questions have been raised. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good courses, but I think there should have been more scrutiny over the introduction of them here.
What about in terms of north-south?
The people who come from the south seem to have a lot more hurdles and have to wait a lot more time, and that seems to defy logic when their course is twice as long.
Mm-hmm. And would there be a need for the same level of caution, Bronagh, in terms of people who qualify in the south?
It's about excellence, it's about the best. That's what we want. We want, really high standards.
I'm asking you in terms of your knowledge at the minute in relation to people who qualify in the south coming to the north.
I would say no, because it's not a free-for-all in the south with providers. Yeah. It's regulated tightly by the government in the south in terms of the qualifications.
But
I mean, it doesn't mean the body shouldn't, interrogate each of the courses, but I can't see it being a problem. Yeah.
Both Bronagh and Joanne wanted to come in. Maybe Bronagh first and then Joanne.
I was just going to say that in one of the clauses in this legislation, it talks about almost like a breathing period where there would be a cautionary acceptance of it, and then you would have to prove your worth after that, relevant to the GTC guidelines. I think that is perfect for the likes of the Coventry IPGCE. Personally speaking, that model of the IPGCE, I have experience of the Coventry one, and that is attracting the type of people that I think we should be attracting into the teaching workforce. And they are people who are currently working in education, have got a degree. It's not like they haven't done, they already have a degree. They're working in education, but could not afford to do a full-time teaching course. And so these people, and a lot of them have young families, etc., so nor could they be going away somewhere or whatever. The Coventry fees are doable, if people have saved for them. And we have people in my school who are on that course, and it is really rigorous. There is a lot more teaching practice in it. There's a lot of work for the school. In mentoring and monitoring, and a lot of meetings with the university, etc. But I know that I backed those people to do that course because I knew they would make excellent teachers, and they currently are in that process now. So I think I agree with you, but if you have that kind of not get out clause, but a pause in that you can be cautiously registered and allowed to teach, and then you prove the rest. I think that covers any difficulties that we should have with those other courses.
Want to add that, Bronagh?
No, that's the employed route, that you're talking about. Just to add that what I think caution is very necessary with that, because what we wouldn't want is, the diffusion of subject areas or specialisms, because that's potential. It has the potential to do that. So I think it needs to be rigorously looked at.
Yeah, and I accept the need for caution, but the level of bureaucracy at the minute, in my view, has set the bar far too high.
Yeah. And it's about what the potential of what might be coming after that. All of the other things that potentially are there that may come after that we need to think about.
Okay. It is important to have the standards there. I have been in touch with people who have not been able to register with GTC&I, even though some of them have taught in other countries for many years and have a degree and a qualification for teaching in those countries. But getting it transferred to here because they don't have the QTS, they're finding difficult. And that's why it's important that we get GTC&I back up so people can make those decisions to get those people back into the workforce?
I think there's some nuances in the positions, but effectively we're saying we need to be cautious about ensuring quality is good, but we should also be building flexibility, and particularly cross-jurisdictionally. You know, if when you've a jurisdiction just a few miles down the road in some cases, who have teachers who are struggling to register. So we definitely hear that. We can maybe follow some of that through with the department. Look, I'm giving a wee bit of latitude with time because there's not likely to be huge numbers of evidence sessions on this. So I think that as much as we can unpick the bill, other than what we hear from the department, would be helpful. David, you want to just comment? And then I'll bring
in many ways we moved past a very substantial issue there, but I just want to check with Joanne. I'm obviously where your principal of SEN school, in terms of the TPL concerns you're saying that there's nothing relevant. Do you think that's a specific concern around SEN schools and the kind of specialised training that they would need, more so than it is generally across the profession and things not being relevant? Is it more
it's certainly more noticeable, David, with our SEN schools. It's just that I'll give you an example. New staff in, we did phonics training, the very basics of learning to read, with staff years and years ago. But new staff in, they hadn't done that before. So I went on to look for phonics training that you think would be available instantly. None planned for that academic year. They're the very basic standards of things. When the Education Library Boards turned into EA, and as Mark said, all those training things were just diminished and cut, the subject specialisms were lost. And so looking for subject training from the Education Authority is, in my view, is non-existent for the basics of things that you want. You can come out of teacher training college and know how to teach phonics, but do you really know phonics inside out so that you can have 6 different strategies to do the one thing, or do you just know what Stranmillis or St Mary's told you? It's that more in-depth knowledge of the basics that is missing in TPL.
I think because we've been grappling with phonics ourselves.
Yeah, grappling's probably the right word. And obviously we have the Transform Ed and some of the CPD stuff that arises from that, and there's a range of views around whether this sort of focus on the science of learning is really practically what teachers need. And again, if there's a big push to just what the department's providing, it may not actually meet the needs on the ground. So I think that's noted. Danny, you were next there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Very informative. It's fair to say that the pace on which the Minister's moving is quite fast, and if you ask me, working fast doesn't mean you're working good. And just before Christmas, I done a wee visit around all of the schools in the area that I represent, and sat down with many school leaders just to hear the challenges they're going through. A recurring theme was very much the amount of consultations that are coming through, and their concern of the speed of the change, but also the fact that because they're having to do so much other work, they're not actually getting the feed into it properly. Would that be a sentiment across the board, rather than just the small sample I was picking up?
It is, but it's also, I think we're seeing a lot of the consultations are taking place, I suppose, outside the school sector too. So maybe it's a reflection of them feeling they can't make their voice heard to those consultations.
Yeah. But the ramifications of the change as well that they see coming down the track will have repercussions for maybe a generation to come, I suppose, at the stages of the changes.
And look, it's not all bad what they're doing. So just to
that's again.
I think the issue here, when you look at how things have been brought in before, it has been at a slightly slower pace than is being expected now, and schools are until schools are being told what is going to be taken out to allow the new stuff to come in. That's the problem. We have schools where there's a huge amount of workload that is going on, and then there's an understanding that through Transform Ed things will change, but it's the pace of change which is the problem. Principals are going to the Transform Ed meetings and they're coming back slightly deflated because they're worried about the pace and whether they will be able to implement all the things. most of the things that are coming through Transform Ed we would agree with coming in, but it's not that they're being brought in, it's the pace that they're being brought in at. And again, when is the training going to take place and how is the training going to take place? Because as I said already, the letter from Ronnie Armour and from Richard Pengelly talking about try to restrict the amount of supply teaching you're paying for. How is it going to be how is it going to be done if you can't bring supply teachers in to let the training take place? You know, there are all of those things. So I think what needs to happen, the pace probably needs to slow, and to get it in and get it embedded properly, because there's been nothing worse than rushing something which is good through, but when it comes in, it's not embedded, and then it falls by the wayside like everything else.
It is fair to say that it is coming in fast. That pace.
It is, yeah. There's an expectation that it's coming through.
And you mentioned the Transform Ed, I suppose, and not saying that personally, not jumping up and down about it, but our young people in particular around this, I'm deeply concerned about the removal of the AS side of it and coursework. And just when we had the department in recently, they were referring to the dangers of AI and the coursework, and almost as a justification to take that away. I think that's really fair on our young people. Like, they should be at the front and centre of everything that we do. And it seems very clear to me that they're not, that the young people I'm talking to. Is that something that you should be picking up as well, coming from school leaders?
Yeah, AI is definitely a factor.
But it shouldn't be a justification, maybe, to remove that aspect of
but
coursework.
There's also, I think, when it comes to coursework and controlled assessment, we need to look at where it's most appropriate too. And I think it is right to look at it, not necessarily saying what the answer is. But I think in some subjects it may be better, more exam assessed, and in other things, particularly when you're measuring skills, subjects like technology, for example, you're going to want the teacher input in that. But that's what I think has led to a lot of problems in the past and around the whole bureaucracy in terms of ensuring standards can sometimes then lead to a lot of dissatisfaction among teachers around that.
I probably moved away from what is in here for today. I apologise for that.
But it's just to say, I think the thing is, if you follow what the Minister has done, once you started on the curriculum, it follows that you had to do all the other things. Because if you have a curriculum, you have to assess it. If you've changed how you teach and how you assess, you're going to have to change your qualifications. So there'll be an element of speed, but he then has to make sure schools are actually resourced for the change that he wants. Because ultimately, democratic system, politicians do decide these things.
Yeah, I suppose that's been the last point of it is that, like Pat alluded to, like possible amendments. Like the last piece of legislation and the first piece of legislation I've done on the Education Committee was the Uniform Bill. The vast majority, 90% of our amendments were completely thrown in the bin. We didn't get the debate it in the chamber, and I suppose we could work really hard on this and bring forward amendments, and the Speaker could do the exact same thing. As it was sitting in front of us, because it actually happened with the Uniform Bill, to be fair, it is 99.9% ended up being the Minister's bill. There was very little input from members. If that were to be the case with this, would you be happy with this going through as is? No, not at all.
I think you need to remember we have a workforce at the minute that there are trust issues with organisations. There are, it's a workforce that can sometimes say, no, I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Or maybe I shouldn't do that, or they question, why am I doing that? What benefit to the young people is that, as a team or as a school, how is that going to make things better? Teachers are quite focused on a lot of that at the minute, and which I think is good, but I think that we need to build trust. You need to build trust. The Education Minister needs to build trust, and the pace at which these things are going through, I'm not sure that's...
And I agree with you. It's actually trust that needs to be built onto us as well. And I've just used the Uniform Bill as an example. You were probably never going to completely block it because it wouldn't be understood. But the reality of it is we could have made it a very, very good piece of legislation if we didn't get the chance. So thank you.
Thank you, Danny. So John had indicated next. So just to remember, we will have the chance to open this out into broader issues. So I've just to keep us focused on the bill as we can, so that we get through the agenda. John, you'd indicated next.
Yes, not often I agree with Danny, but yes, I do get feedback about the pace of change, even with head teachers and teachers who are positive about some of the changes and the amount of consultations. Just a couple I've got quite a few actually. But see, in terms of discipline, I mean, some teachers have contacted me, and I've used my own background as sort of head of PSNI discipline branch. Is there a concern that with the new legislation, the Board of Governors won't be able to deal with those minor issues, minor conduct issues, and minor performance issues in a very swift and sort of proportionate way?
No, that's not an issue at all in this. We've lots of other complaints, but not that. And
right, so
I think schools' internal processes will still run. I mean, and ideally, they actually should be running through. If you get to the point where somebody's in front of the GTC, that's going to be where they've been found to have reached the bar for dismissal or thereabouts. Yeah. So, I mean, it should have gone through an internal process first. Otherwise, the GTC will not cope with the thousands of complaints.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Well, look, I just hope that proportionality is embedded and stays. So, you've covered off the membership fee. Are you content that at any stage through the disciplinary procedures, the teacher will still be able to contact the teaching union for assistance and representation?
Yeah, that won't be an issue either. In parallel bodies, the person actually will have union representation and then legal representation if required in front of the panels. I don't think that'll be an issue.
Okay. I've been campaigning for the right to wear school coats. So if you're a young person, you're going to school, a teacher can't be standing in front of the gate saying you're not allowed to wear a coat because it's not either we don't have a school official coat or it's not the branded school coat. Is that something you would support, that the children should be able to wear?
Yep. Children should be going to school feeling comfortable and feeling safe and all of those things. And part of that is if they're going into school and they're freezing cold because they have to wear a particular blazer as opposed to a proper coat that their family would have bought for them. I mean, there's no reason why children shouldn't be coming into school feeling safe and feeling that they're coming into school warm in the first place, because if you're coming into school freezing cold, it's going to take you about half an hour before you're ready to start learning anyway. So it's simple things to get. Yeah, there's no reason why not.
I don't believe that any child should be challenged about whatever sort of coat they should be wearing. They should be.
Look, I agree they should be allowed to wear a coat. So I think we're nearly there with the draft guidelines for the school uniform guidelines. It's been included, but I just wanted to clarify it and get it more hammered down. So it was a clear legal right. The next one's a practical one, and that is really for schools in the sense that some pupils tell me, well, look, I would bring a coat, but if it was allowed. But one of the problems is I've nowhere to store the coat. I've nowhere to hang it. So therefore, I'm forced to walk around with this big bulky coat under my arm and therefore just choose not to. I mean, would you support the view that every child should not only be able to wear a coat to school, but have somewhere to hang the thing?
Yeah.
Okay, this is really easy. This is easier than the last time we discussed on the inspections. Just general budget. In terms of the bigger picture, I mean, dire financial situation faced by the department. I mean, if you were in charge of finding savings in order to give teachers the pay awards, where would you find the savings?
You're going to have to find it's going to be very difficult to find savings. I think you'll find that schools over many years have already cut everything back that they can cut. And there's so little there to make any more savings, John.
Could I say one thing? I've been going around schools. I'm actually at 2 this morning, and I always ask about procurement. And I say, look, if you want to get that wall painted, what would you pay under a procured service? And they typically give me a figure that's 3.5 times what they could pay a local tradesperson. Now, I know there's issues. You've got to make sure you get right people and vetting and all of that. But I just think we're getting ripped off, the public. I mean, I also spoke to one principal who said he had to get a flagstone fixed. One flagstone. It was cracked because someone would trip on it. Mm-hmm. And it cost £500 to replace one flagstone. And I queried that and said, are you sure you had to pay that? And the procured service is £500. Do you think we're getting ripped off with procurement?
Yes.
I think there are different views on that, John. I think the important thing is finding out the facts, and I do think it would be something that your committee should probably look at, because there are people in the EA will tell you there's swings and roundabouts in this. For example, we're getting the oil cheap for all the schools. You know, so I think it would be worth that would definitely be worth delving into and finding out what is going on.
One last one, and you mentioned TPL. Again, speaking of schools, tell me, actually, getting sub-teachers in any basis is sometimes very difficult. They log on to this, whatever it is, and there's very few sub-teachers available. I mean, with things like the curriculum review, I'm told a lot of teachers, well, there's 2 points here. One, didn't want to release anybody because they had to release them for up to 20 days, and you just can't afford to lose a teacher for 20 days. So I thought 20 days was excessive. And second of all, the issue that when they try and get sub-teachers, they log onto the system and there just aren't any available. Is that 2 issues you would...
We just ask briefly, as we're well off track on the bill here. So
I think the teaching unions
Just because they mentioned PPL.
Teaching unions are doing an awful lot of work to make sure that, you know, the workload, teachers' pay and everything, you know, is improving to keep teachers in Northern Ireland. So I think that's a very, very something that we need to do a lot more work on, you know, you know, in Northern Ireland, is to keep those teachers and make teaching in Northern Ireland attractive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that supply pool is obviously very important for the proper functioning of the system, and I think quite often those teachers do feel underappreciated. But it's not the system, as in the NISTRA system, it's people deciding whether they want to work as supply teachers or not, when there's other opportunities elsewhere that pay more money and maybe not necessarily the money, but offer longer continuity of work.
Okay, I'll just finish that. I'm just going to say one thing, because I'll say it while you're all there. I mean, I'm still speaking to teachers who are getting badly injured at school. And I do think it's something we all need to focus on. I was at primary school today, and there's teachers who've been elbowed in the throat. And it's not a blame the children, but we have teachers being injured. And I just think we need to make sure they've got all the training and support that they need. And one thing I'm going to write to the EA about, and I'm going to say it in this, I've asked teachers and principals, final remarks, when a teacher's assaulted or injured, does anyone in the EA actually contact them? And says no. And you can put in a form to say you've actually had your broken nose or broken teeth. Nobody ever picks up the phone and say that was awful. So I just wanted to put that on the public record.
Yeah. John, I think Michelle, you'd indicated next.
Thanks, Chair. Can I clarify, are you going round us again for other questions, or just do them all now?
I mean, I think it looks like members are opening up way beyond the scope of the bill, so I'm not, I mean, if you've already asked questions outside the scope of the bill...
want to be limited for time.
Yeah, I do think we're at risk of pushing things for time, so, I mean, I'm treating this as, unless anyone has stuck to the bill in their questioning, I mean, I'm happy to bring anyone in for final questions, but it's entirely up to you how you use your time now from here on in. But I think we are here to scrutinise the bill, and I think it's important we do that. Okay, well, first of all, just on the bill, I guess you explained you didn't have time to give us a briefing, and that's fine, I'm not chastising you on that, but we did have the department we're in, and we had their session and part of our notes, and they suggested that there had been a lot of engagement on this and that it had been really quite positive. You had a few concerns, so I was just a bit kind of taken aback by the response today.
No, I think they're mistaken civility for agreement.
Not used to it. I don't know what to do with that. Okay, so just you're very equivocal that this is not going to do, so I am genuinely wasn't expecting you to be quite as definite about that. The disciplinary stuff's really important to all of this, obviously. So I just want to get a sense, are you clear from what's there now how that disciplinary process is going to work, and in particular the kind of timescales that will be in place for this?
No, that's not clear. I think, go back, John's question in terms of what happens in schools won't change. Yeah. But in terms of how it's going to work in this body, no, that'll need subsequent regulation and decisions made. And
have you anything at this point that you'd want to say on that in terms of how long you'd want something?
We would think in the vast majority of cases, they only should be going to the GTC after the school has fulfilled its processes. Yeah. Now, it's possible you get to a situation where maybe a school refuses to engage in any process despite something very serious having happened, but then there should be bigger questions asked about that school. But on the whole, we don't want a system where a member of the public can say, well, when I was in school 10 years ago, this happened. It should be to the school first to follow its disciplinary procedures.
And you've been very clear that there's an issue of trust here with all of this, and ultimately what's proposed here will be the department controlling it. But in terms of the content overall, if that was in the hands of someone you considered independent, would there be parts of this that you would say, look, and you have pulled out stuff for us that you're happy with?
I think if it was
would that give you more comfort?
It would if it was genuinely independent, and I think there's other models out there. Quite often with like an independent chair from outside the sector who's keeping everyone on track, and I think because I know I've been on the Teachers Pension Board, for example. They've had a policy of having an independent chair who's not on either side, but he's making sure everyone is doing what they're meant to be doing, and that can work very well.
And outside the scope of the bill then, I'm kind of concerned that John has my papers, because he's asking all the stuff I have in I have something in here about the assaults on school. I have a couple of things, but I'm going to focus on this, and John's raised it already. I did get some figures around this from a written question. And I think the breakdown of assaults in schools was understandably higher in special schools. We understand the circumstances there. In other schools, though, mainstream schools, there was 288 assaults on staff. 181 of those were in primary school, but only 6 in post-primary school. So what is your assessment of that? Is that just an under-reporting? And if that's the case, why are people under-reporting in post-primary?
Clearly, there's under-reporting, and I sort of was hoping this question would come up because just by way, if you don't know, at the Teachers Negotiating Committee in 2011, we agreed a policy whereby schools and employing authorities would report. We're still waiting 15 years later for that to happen. It is happening in EA special schools, have very good compliance, probably because they're dealing with so many. But what we're not getting is actually the full picture in primary, and I suspect a lot of the primary figures are now coming from the SPIMS. So I suspect that's where those figures are coming from. But to say there were only 6 in the whole of post-primary doesn't stack up. We have a T&C agreement in place, but the employers aren't following it. We know the EA, for example, has spent the last 3-4 years trying to come up with a policy. We've made our views known that the one in draft is not fit for purpose. Our big concern has been that trade union health and safety reps have to be consulted by employers, or any employer. But EA have up to now have been refusing to put that in their guidance. And if that's not happening, we are not going to actually address what's happening in schools.
That's very concerning, and I'm sure you're concerned for your members in that front. Have you any sense of how serious these assaults are? Is there how many go to maybe perhaps be prosecuted? Or
no, I wouldn't say. I'd say there's very few prosecuted, because I do think it is fair, and the majority are happening for children who probably don't have the capacity to actually then say it's an assault. But assaults do occur as well that would meet that definition. But I think if we never get a proper baseline, we never know whether things are improving or they're getting worse. Because even if we did get more schools complying, the numbers will go up next year, and there might even be headlines saying the numbers are up. But that, until everyone complies, we won't know.
Yeah, because I want to be cautious, but the numbers, there's a rise from 790 to like over 3,500. But there is a complexity in that picture, and it is reasonable that would be accurately reflected.
Perhaps when you're thinking about recording numbers, it may be useful to look at incidents that repeat by the same person, how that's being managed, how that young person's being supported, how the staff are being supported, trained. Those are sorts of things I think in this day and age that we should be able to look at. And I know that schools, all school sectors in Northern Ireland look at that, and they try to support that young person and the staff as best they can to make sure that a crisis doesn't happen. So it's about that repeating nature of things, and out of control, not being able to be controlled or supported whenever things.
And I think that then really highlights when you've legislation that says health and safety reps have to be consulted on risk assessments. It's not happening, and the EA aren't prepared to put that to paper. That's a problem.
There's also an issue though just of age. Primary school kids get very distressed, dysregulated, and they just kill dead things around them. Where in post-primary, I've worked in both, post-primary there would be more of them telling you to F off and walking away. So because they are more in control of themselves than primary. So there is a bit of that in there as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Cara, you'd indicated?
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much to the panel for being here. We love to hear directly from yourselves. I'm going to go a bit out of scope as well. I just have two questions. They're just opinion questions. One of them pertains to point 8, the 10-point plan. Weeks previous, I had asked for clarification of how educational disadvantage is defined, and it was predominantly around children who are on free school meals, and it was like maternal educational attainment, so how much education the mother of the family had received, and I had felt very strongly that neglected to understand the different needs of our young people today, the trauma that they experience in the home, things like domestic violence, addiction in the home. And I just love to hear your perspective about point 8 of the 10-point plan and how educational disadvantage is defined, and maybe if you could share just some testimonies of your experience in education, and if there's anything there you think we can do to kind of beef that definition out a little bit to help every child, I suppose, the best we can.
Right. Well, my background is 15 years within the ODIS service, post-primary, Key Stage 4. So I think when we're talking about trust and we're talking about valuing areas of education, we have an education authority that's outlining cost-cutting measures for some of the most vulnerable young people in Northern Ireland who are at the end of their educational journey and at a point where they will get real support that will, in something like 87% of each of those young people change their lives, and they are being targeted now. That is not on, and I totally disagree with it. And I think that is because people do not understand what services do. So disadvantaged young people in Northern Ireland who are going to cost yourselves a huge amount of money moving forward, we are starting to deplete the services that are the ones that are going to change their lives and make them, have a plan, pursue a career, be valued members of our society. So it is completely wrong that those areas of education are being targeted.
Can I add, in terms of the criteria that are picked, quite often it comes down to what's the purpose. If it's to get a system-wide benchmark, it sometimes is then using, as blunt as it is, something like free school meals, because at least you can then see how a cohort as a whole is doing. But it doesn't, I think if you're getting at as the individual then, it can be more complicated than that. So it depends, I think, what you're using it for.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And then just lastly, off the back of that, there's been a lot of changes within our education system, the discussion around curriculum review. We're looking at Transform Ed. Do you think at the moment teachers' unions feel like they're being listened to, or do you feel that there's an air of hostility, or do you feel teachers can really feel they can be honest and contribute their beliefs and their opinions? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'm just curious to feel, do you feel listened to in your capacity as unions and as teachers?
As teachers, no. I've had the pleasure, and I'm choosing my words carefully, of going to 3 Transform Ed events, and all 3 ended with me out in the hall with teachers who were very, very distressed. And these were all people who had filled in the consultations, felt very much like you, had put time into it, had thought into it, had got together in groups and whatever, and they felt like their views and their thoughts were just not relevant at all. And that was how they felt, even at the Transform Ed events where it's all, bells and whistles and lovely glossy brochures, etc. If they asked a question about details of things, it was literally glossed over or ignored. And one of the things in particular is for those schools that have specialist units, and for general special education children as well. The curriculum review that we got, I think we got a paragraph in all of the whole curriculum review. And schools who had taken on SPIMS and other specialist units had felt like they were going to be left high and dry because of these. They were going to take an average, you know, to test how well kids were doing. But if you were a school that had taken on many specialist units, then obviously your school average grades, for want of a better word, were going to be a lot lower, and they felt like they were going to be punished and targeted with more meaningless TPL. So there was the details are not specific enough where people can find themselves in it and find how they're going to be successful in it for the children in their school. But certainly the feedback that I have been getting is that even the most elite of schools and academic of schools, their teachers in there feel like they have not been listened to.
I mean, I think that probably affects what we're hearing too at school level. However, in terms of engagement with us as unions, I don't know that we could complain in that. I mean, for example, yesterday we had a very good meeting around the assessment. So that engagement is taking place, and I think if we were to ask for more meetings, we would get them.
Yeah.
But it's making sure it's the, I suppose, subject specialists, people in SPIMS, people in special schools, making sure those people are listened to is the challenge.
I think one of the challenges we have is making sure that the people that we bring to those meetings are the people that need to be there. Because it's okay for the likes of myself, who has been out of the classroom since 2016, saying what I think is going on. We need to be attending meetings with practitioners who are in the classroom, so that we can hear exactly what is going on. We get an awful lot of information from our members by going out and meeting with them and going to our branch meetings and things like that. But there's nothing better than the people who need to hear the things, hearing it directly from the people who are living it. So it's something which we have to be more aware of as well.
Yeah. Look, that's really helpful. And Chair, just a final comment to say thank you all so much. It's great to hear what is working and where you do feel listened to, but also those teachers and school leaders who have the expertise, who can't see themselves in the current changes. So that's so helpful for us as a committee to know, and thank you for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Cara. Kathy, you were next.
Thanks, Chair. I was waiting until the second round of questioning there, so I wanted to ask...
Any sense we're discussing the bill is long gone, so crack on.
And Joanne, just to say, your word pleasure, I don't think it was misconstrued there like civility was, so don't worry about that. I wanted to ask about the workload review and just maybe get an update on that. I know that it was completed and published towards the end of last year. Can you give us a sense of where we are with it? I believe there was trade union rep on the panel for that.
Well, the Minister said in his press statement yesterday he'll make an announcement in the next couple of weeks, so we're looking forward to that, and certainly teachers and the feedback to us are very much looking forward to it.
Okay, so where is it at the minute with
well, it's with the Minister. It was published on the 28th of November.
Yeah.
It's with the Minister since then. Obviously he's taken soundings from his people around the department. But obviously when it comes out, I mean, what we will need something similar to what we had in the Heads of Agreement, where there's a timeline of how things are going to be implemented. The Minister will probably have to set up an implementation team to get it put forward. What we don't want is what happened 2 years ago, where there was loads of meetings with the unions and management said they came up with 247 recommendations and about 3 of them have been brought forward. So we need this to be a meaningful outcome. The Minister called for this. There's 27 recommendations within it. Those recommendations, some will cost money, some can be brought through quite quickly. But what we need is we need to know how they're going to be implemented and how effective they're going to be. So we once the Minister has given an announcement of his understanding, at that point we will then be feeding back in
and it'll take a level of resourcing, because while there's some low-hanging fruit in a way that'll take decisions to be made and can be implemented, some of the others are going to take a bit more money and time to actually get into place.
And have you any sense of where that is heading from the Minister, or are you just awaiting?
Well, I think I'm prejudging too much, but I would say positive.
I think the fact that the Minister called for it, there's he has to take responsibility for it from now on. It was he asked for the independent review. We were quite happy to accept it, and I have to say, given that we have got it, I know my colleagues in the Republic of Ireland are asking the Southern Government for something similar on teacher workload. Right, okay. So it's something like that. But I mean, in terms of as I say, we don't know. The Minister has spoken positively to us about it.
Okay.
It's what happens next. It's important.
Okay. And in the coming weeks, you think that something will be published?
That's what he said in his press statement yesterday, in terms of the pay deal.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Kathy, David, you'd indicated.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to probably explore a bit further because I don't have knowledge of it. I was looking up bits and pieces there. You talked about the Coventry PCGE model and the IQTS element of it. The way you were talking about it seemed like Coventry was one element of that, but there was others.
There's 4 of them.
There's 4. Apologies.
Can you speak a bit more to that? Just give us some more awareness to that. I sort of think that it sounds very like I used to work for GMC, and certainly one of the things we quite often talk in terms of Brexit around recognition of qualifications and so on. But
I think
underlying that there was concern sometimes.
I think that might be how then Northern Ireland could possibly have been recognised as a different jurisdiction.
Okay.
But I think that would need explored.
Okay.
But certainly I think one of the concerns is that it's a generalist type PGCE course, whereas, if you're a maths teacher, it's all right having a maths degree, but you need to know teaching maths to children is a different skill.
Yeah.
And that skill needs to be taught. So that's why we would have concerns about the generalist type approach and too much on the job, because there's some very important pedagogical knowledge that's needed.
From a place of not having the knowledge, I hear what Joanne said, and I think what that says is whether it's through this or whether it's through other journeys, we want those people that are of value in different roles in schools, if they want to take that route to step into teaching, to have those routes. That's absolutely. I think we've talked about it on committee before. So we definitely want that, but definitely I would, from a committee point of view, have probably curiosity to learn more about this and how it lines up, and making sure that the standards are.
Our system was caught by surprise, and we were told GTC had no option but to allow it, when I think there should have been scrutiny before. But no matter how good it is, there should have been scrutiny.
Yeah.
I think there's also a difference between, I don't know how I would feel if we were talking about a PGCE qualification that would allow a subject specialist in a post-primary school. Yeah. I don't know how I would feel that way. Yeah. We're primary only, so the course suits primary only. I don't know enough, Justin, to comment on.
No, it just feels like something that deserves more scrutiny, to make sure that maybe courses that maybe aren't matching the standard of what others are being put through or having to go through to reach a certain standard are, and it's not to take away from the qualifications of those who are seeking that for cost reasons or others, because we need to make sure that they have those routes, but we also need to understand and make sure that there isn't one that's a lesser standard than others. And I'm not saying they are, because I don't know enough about it, but I think it's something we do need to apply scrutiny with. So thanks for making us aware of it. Thank you, Chair.
Just consider it might be worthwhile when we have GTCNI themselves in to brief in the bill. It may be worth just exploring that with them in terms of where that qualification sits. It's an issue that's been raised with me from a number of sources as well, so I do think it is worth.
And back to the old probationary year that we used to have to do. That would be a good idea.
Actually, again, something we can raise with the department. I just wanted to ask one final thing in the bill that wasn't really picked up on questions, was around the fee issue. Yeah. So just to be clear, Justin, my sense from your evidence was that you really don't feel the teachers should be paying for this at all.
Not if it's not independent.
Not on its current format.
Yeah.
In clause 12, which deals with fees, it seems to me that it's built into this that the fees that are charged have to cover the costs of actually running GTC, but build in permission to go beyond that. Yeah. Does that feel too open-ended from your perspective in terms of where those fees could go?
Too open-ended. I imagine the logic is, say, if you want a new IT system, it would allow you to, borrow to do that, to borrow from the members. But I think overall, there's so many functions been taken on, and they're all departmental functions, that we think the department should pay for them.
Yeah. It's good to get that clear on the record, and we can pick the fees up. Certainly, I'm open-minded around the fees, but I did pause at clause 12 around that sense of the fee has to cover costs. I mean, we've no idea how much it's going to cost to run this new body, and teachers are going to pick up the tab for that in the current format. So I think we'd need some assurances from the department around that.
Every hearing will potentially cover the same type of costs as an employment tribunal. I mean, it's going to be big money.
I think that's something we need to maybe just build some safeguards in around that, and certainly we can pick that up as we go through the process. Look, I think probably we've taken more of your time than you maybe anticipated. I think we've covered a lot of the broader issues in the questioning already, so I'm going to propose we bring the evidence session to an end. Other than the committee clerk is suggesting it, just if you wanted to speak at all to the committee bill, if any of your members are feeding back around that issue around the right to wear trousers in schools, is that something that you would have anything you want to say?
I think in terms of having taught in primary schools and post-primary schools, there's no reason why any child shouldn't be allowed to choose whether they wear trousers or not. Because it's not going to have a massive effect on their education. Obviously, there may have to be things put in place as to whether they're appropriate, the trousers that the children are wearing. In the same way, there's times when teachers and classroom assistants there are questions as to whether the trousers are appropriate. But it's back to the same thing. Children are coming into school, and especially the younger children in primary 1, 2 and 3, they're sitting down cross-legged in open forums, So, in reality, if they've trousers on, it doesn't matter. If they've short skirts on, it does. It's that sort of thing. So I don't see any reason why children shouldn't be allowed to make that choice for themselves. And it's actually in every school's uniform policy. Because there's a uniform policy that says you can wear trousers or you can wear a skirt. Now, in terms of that, it's normally seen as gender. Boys will wear trousers, girls will wear skirts. But the way you're not going to have to change your uniform policy much to say you have the choice. And I think it's as well, you have the same issue around the cost of the skirt and what skirt it is, because I know my daughters went to an all girls school, and they changed the skirt 3 times as they went up through. So we had kids of stepping stones, as you know. And after the third year, they all had to change their skirts. And there is a cost there. Whereas if you can have a pair of trousers, which basically is going to be the same trousers for boys and girls, it makes life easier for families as well, because you're no longer worrying about, I have to have a different uniform for this child than I have for that child.
Something quick on the bill.
Sorry, I think we've got witnesses maybe needing to move
move
on from this. So I'll just close things at this stage to say we might be in touch with you. I think just from the session, Transform Ed has come up a number of times, and I think getting maybe some input from yourselves, from the teaching profession around that might be helpful in the future. So we'll maybe discuss that after the briefing. Look, thank you all for your time, and appreciate your patience with the briefing. Thank you. Okay, so just while the witnesses are making their way out, obviously some of that evidence will just feed into the committee stage for the bill. Are there any actions anybody wants to suggest other than that arising from the discussion? I would just, as a reference at the end there, I'd want to maybe suggest I do think Transform Ed came through quite a bit there in terms of just the impact that's having on schools. And I think we have as a committee struggled a bit to really get into the detail of that particular policy area, and it might be worth bringing the NITC back at some point in the future to maybe hear a bit more clearly some of the views of their members around that, if members were agreed on that. Agreed. Mm-hmm. Anything else at all?
Sure,
yes, Deputy Chair.
Sorry. Fair play to John, he has raised this issue of children being allowed to wear their own coats to school, and it arose in the chamber yesterday or the day before, or Monday I think it was, when there was a question raised about this, and the Minister gave so many caveats in regard to coats that children could wear. I don't think it makes much change to what the what was happening originally with uniform policy. I mean, my assumption was that if a child has an overcoat of any sort, they could wear it and then hang it up when they get into school. But the minister started talking about colours and this and that and the other yesterday. So could we write to the department and get some clarity around that particular issue?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to consider that. I'll just bring you in a wee second, Cathy, that there is correspondence later in the pack on uniform, so I'm happy to sort of note that, and there may be other things arising from that correspondence on uniform, but I think the code issue certainly should be included in that, so happy to consider that, Cathy, and then David.
Yeah, no, it's just on the back of what Pat said, like alarm bells rang with me because the answer the minister gave actually gave the impression that it could become a statutory part of the uniform now, and it actually might add to parents' costs in having to buy a particular coat and not the coat that the child already has.
So I think I'm certainly happy to note all that. I'm just conscious there might be other uniform related bits of correspondence because we have a fairly detailed thing in from the department on that, David, and then Danny.
Just say on the coach thing, and it's not a criticism. I think it was John that actually asked the question. I could be wrong on Monday, but it was the wording was such. It was around. I think it was the same day talking about a school coat, and I wasn't sure. Well, because I thought the premise of what John has been pushing for a while is the right to wear a coat.
Any coat.
Where when it says school coat,
generic coat.
Yeah, well, that's because sometimes when you hear school coat, you imagine branded sort of school coat, and that's I think there's some confusion around that one.
You see, if the school's going to insist on a particular colour, a particular material, you know, then
we're back.
As I meant, it's two very different proposals in that sense with the word.
Yeah, if I just come in, Chair, I mean, the thrust for me is that they're allowed to wear the coat to school, as opposed to a school designated coat. And look, I mean, I could work with if someone said, like, you know, it's to be roughly speaking black or blue or grey or something, you know. I mean, but in essence, I think if we could walk away with the minister having in those draft guidelines that you have the right to wear that coat, even if it is not a branded coat, to school, and number two, that somehow we need to be forcing schools. And it's not too much to ask that you have to have somewhere to hang your coat. I mean, we wouldn't walk around Stormont all day with the coat over our arm. You know, it's just ridiculous that you've nowhere to hang a coat in school. And that's a practical issue. We just should really put pressure on the minister to put pressure on the schools.
Thanks, John. So, yep, content to note all that. Again, conscious there may be wider uniform issues as we have that bit of correspondence in, so we'll pick all of that up. And Danny, you've been very patient. Apologies.
Sure. I have two things. I'll start off with the first wee quick one, just on the back of your proposal for bringing them back in again. Just around transformate, could we schedule maybe one of our youth assembly maybe to come in and talk and to give our young people that voice for them changes as well. And the second one, it's actually about the whole legislative process, not just the uniform bill. I know I referenced it in my question. I am concerned about how we approach this here with amendments. There was a lot of work that went into the last time, and look, I know John wasn't on the committee at the time, and the Ulster Unionist Party, I don't think replaced anybody at that time, and probably don't hear it all. But we heard all the evidence around coats, gloves, all of it. We had it all. It was all within our amendments. It was all within the scope of the bill. Yet we didn't get a chance to debate it and vote on it. You heard it from the unions here today. As it stands, in their opinion, that would be no good to them. Now, if we were to bring forward really good proposals working together as a committee, like, we have no cast iron guarantees that we are even going to get a debate that, and I just don't think that's really fair at all. And I know we're not going to get any reassurances, but I just think that needs to be alerted to people understand that it's not on us. It's very much as the minister and his bills.
Yeah, look, obviously understand anyone who went through the school uniform bills process, a lot of frustrations there. I mean, ultimately, I think it's still essential the committee does its due diligence on the bill and brings forward amendments as it sees fit. So
GTC stuff.
Yeah.
Just say, and it was what I was going to ask at the end, and Justin, from what Justin said, he may wish to come back on it, but it said about none of the functions of the GTC, the functions of GTC are things that are departmental responsibilities, and therefore department should pay for it. I would say some of the regulatory elements of it are not necessarily a departmental responsibility, and there are different models for that taking place. And I know GMC, I think, is slightly independent. I think it's appointed by Parliament and so on. So that's what I have experience of. That's why I reference it. But you have an appointed council there. But doctors pay, I think, over £400 a year to be registered with their body in that respect. So I don't say that to contradict, but just as there are different models out there, and some it's not unheard of, in that respect.
No, I think that we will be hearing from the GTC themselves. Under the current structures, one will be hearing from the department. It is an established principle that the professionals pay into their professional regulatory body. I suppose it's that balance of the confidence that the body they're paying into is genuinely independent.
I understand the argument they're making.
We'll have to navigate that. Okay. Anything else that we want to raise before we move on to the next item?
David, did you have another question about the bill for that team of witnesses? No.
Or about the bill
about
for
the
that?
GTC. I thought you said at the end you did.
No, I was just interested in hearing more about that.
The IPGC. Yeah. Okay. I think that should come out in future evidence sessions, but I think if we do need clarity, and that's certainly one I would want to pick up on. Okay, members, that concludes that evidence session, so that the record taken will be added to the committee papers on the bill. Item 7 then is correspondence, so I'd refer members to pages 29 to 40 of your packs and 44 to 51 of tabled papers, where we have items provided under correspondence. Summary note included at page 29. I'll run through any where there may be need for committee decision or discussion, otherwise it'll be as per summary note. Item 7.3 on page 39, it's correspondence from an individual potentially representing a campaign group seeking to present a petition on concern about the future of Christianity and Christian ethos within Northern Ireland's education system. It's quite a specific request to present that petition to committee on the 28th of January. It's not completely clear from me from the correspondence whether they want to come and present evidence to committee or simply formally hand over a petition. I'll maybe ask the clerk to speak to that, but my sense is we don't really have a facility as committee to receive a petition because we're not in a position to make decisions arising from the asks of the petition. So I'm certainly open, based on anything else the clerk wants to add, that if they want to provide us with a digital copy of that petition, we can certainly consider it in correspondence, but it feels that the petition may be better directed to the department, or if there was an individual MLA wanted to pick that petition up, there are procedures within the Assembly to allow for that. I don't think our agenda on the 20th permits another evidence session, so I think we need to just make that clear at this stage. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
I mean, Standing Order 22 is about public petitions, and it allows for a member to present a petition to the Assembly. So it would be for an individual member to take this up on behalf of the organisation, and that would give them a platform where they'd have plenary time allocated by the business committee, so there would be a bit of a delay, I suppose, while that's scheduled, and then the petition would automatically go to the minister and then come back to the committee in due course. So I think, I'm happy to advise the correspondent of that, and then maybe they could approach members unless there's a member who particularly wants to lift it now.
I mean, I don't know specifically about the so I don't want to commit to it, but I'm happy to discuss with the person who's corresponded with us, and it seems to be things that I would be aligned with, and happy to investigate whether I can be helpful in that regard.
Well, our members contend if there's individual members who want to approach the group directly in terms of taking that petition on through the procedures that the clerk's outlined, we can also, I suggest, direct them to how to correspond with the department on this. But to regretfully, advise we don't have scope in our agenda on the 28th to receive another evidence session. But happy to see a digital copy of what their asks are, and it'll be included in packs. We all agreed? Okay, item 7.5 in tabled papers, page 44. It's a written ministerial statement on the draft early learning and childcare strategy. I think you'll see in your forward work plan there's potential for that to be scheduled, I think potentially at the end of March. So are we agreed that we arrange an oral briefing from the department on the strategy? Agreed?
Oh, sorry.
Oh yes, Catherine.
Could I just add, do we know if they're definitely coming in at the end of March? Just conscious that the consultation is closing at the end of March, so it would be good to get somebody in
Would be the right
prior to
timing,
that, or around that time.
Yeah, no, that is the date. That date is confirmed.
It's confirmed.
Yeah,
Okay.
since the tabled forward work plan went out in italics, they have actually confirmed that date. So,
No, that's good to get that confirmed. Item 7.6 on page 49 of tabled papers. It's a notice of intention to make an oral ministerial statement on the North-South Ministerial Council Education sector, which was a sector meeting which was held on the 23rd of January. Are we content to note? Agreed. Item 7.7 on page 50 is a response from the Department of Education regarding the Minister's visit to Israel, and it was around clarifying some dates around when itineraries were established and shared with the Department. Happy to open up for members' views. I mean, I would propose that we note at that stage. I'm not sure how much further we can take sort of any of the inquiries with this, but happy to open it up to members if anyone wants to add anything. Happy to note. Item 7.8, page 51 of tabled papers, response from the department on the school uniform guidelines. So this picks up the conversation before. So look, I think if we're agreed that on the issue of school coats that the committee is keen to get clarity on precisely what the guidelines provide. Is it unrestricted right for pupils to wear a coat of their choice, or are there restrictions around colours and style and all of that associated with it? There's an additional query there coming through from John around whether the Minister has any views around providing appropriate space to actually store or hang a coat once brought into school. Is there anything else other than that around the uniform correspondence that we would want to add to that? I mean, there are a number of queries that have been addressed there, or are we content on those issues?
Just a small point. If it turns out that it could be that you can wear a coat, a generic coat, it does beg the question is why we're having to bring forward a committee bill then for girls with the right to wear trousers.
Undoubtedly, the correspondence does raise that question, as did the Minister's responses in the Chamber. Whatever provisions have been put in place on coats, that they do place more duties on schools than anything around trousers that currently does, and it does indicate the extent to which this is just eminently deliverable and it could be done, which it is incredibly frustrating. I have no issue in adding to that correspondence if the Minister would, in the interests of good use of assembly time, would he consider just making that minor change to the guidelines to allow all pupils to wear trousers. I think I'd be keen to be explicit on that, to say we're not really interested on whether the Minister encourages people to campaign for the right to wear trousers.
Exactly.
We can all campaign for things, and we credit to any young person who mounts a campaign on any issue that they're passionate about in school, but the Minister's job's not to encourage people to campaign for things. He has the power to do something, and we really would like clarity. Is he going to do it, and what is the rationale for not doing it? Yep. Content on that, Michelle?
I was actually just going, yes, what is the rationale for not doing it? I was just endorsing that as a specific question. Absolutely.
Just end with do your job, please.
Well, look, I think there's a degree of frustration, I think, of even the need to be, and I think this has been reflected even just in content on social media that people have been putting forward. Why are we even discussing this? It is hard to fathom, but are we agreed?
When you think of the amount of time, assembly time, committee time, officials time that are going to be devoted to this, if it goes to the floor of the Assembly, it will pass. Yep. There's absolutely no doubt about that. So
we are in stroke of a pen territory to resolve this matter, but we're not. Unfortunately, there's not a meeting of minds there. But I think we have agreement that we'll write on that basis and on those other issues around the coats as well.
Can I just please do come through. Just because it probably should have and didn't at the time. I know Pat keeps me writing this with the Israel letter that I was on the trip. It's a declaration of interest, but interest, but I don't believe it's conflict.
Thank you. Thanks for just raising that. And then item 7.9, page 60 of tabled papers. It was an invite to me as chair. And look, apologies again. I think there'd been an issue with the correspondence that I shared. The original invite wasn't in there. Just for open disclosure, I have provisionally accepted the invitation to speak at the Blackboard Awards for teachers at the end of the month. But I was invited as chair, so it would just need committee agreement if everyone's content with that. Agreed. Okay, and then we also had, which was at the top of the agenda in chairperson's business, but I think was in the interest of just getting onto your evidence session, I'd moved it on to correspondence. We have a letter that was tabled from a parent, and it was, I think it went to all committee members, and it is in relation to the CAG test. It is a request for an intervention to be made, I'm assuming at departmental level, to either permit or require the CAG test to be facilitated in primary school settings rather than go into post-primary settings for that. So, I mean, I'll put out my view at this stage and happy then to open up for members in terms of how we might want to respond. I mean, I have sympathy for in relation to the issue that the whole CAG process is really stressful, and parents will make decisions around whether to put their children into that process for a whole range of reasons, and in many ways the system drives some of those decisions that parents have to make. Understand that for many kids going to that, to an unfamiliar environment is stressful. I suppose I would just want to note a concern about any attempt to put a duty on primary schools to facilitate something that has no statutory footing. It's effectively an admissions test for schools that has no basis in law or in statutory provision. You may have schools that really fundamentally oppose the test, or that don't prepare their children for it, and I would just worry you could have scenarios where you could create, some schools offering that provision, some not, and it just could put undue duress on schools on that basis. I really do have sympathy for the process that kids often have to go through, but I wouldn't be terribly happy about pushing for that to be mandated. I would be content to write to the department to establish if they have any powers to direct primary schools in that regard, so we can clarify that for the parent, but it's not something that I would be actively lobbying for. Happy to open up for discussion. David, do you want to come in?
Just to note that I think the CAG system is imperfect. It's not where, I think for different reasons, it's not exactly where all of us would want to land. I do think it's the least worst in that regard, because I am supportive of the principle of academic selection, and therefore would not only be sympathetic but would support that being facilitated within the best environments for the children. I understand that's not going to be shared, but I just put on record our own thoughts around that.
Thank you, David. Any other members have a view? I mean, is there any correspondence arising from this that we would be content to agree, or are we noting the correspondence at this stage? As I said, I would be content to write to the department to establish for the parent what the department's powers in this space would be, but I certainly wouldn't want to actively lobby for an intervention. I think, Deputy Chair, were you looking to come in there?
I agree with you, Chair.
Okay.
And to note the parents' concerns that has written to us, perhaps.
I think to give credence to her concerns, it is a really difficult process for kids, and I think we all agree. Whatever we think about academic selection, we agree on that. So look, if we're content to write to the department to establish what their powers of direction would be, so that we can share that with the parent, but to be clear, the committee has not taken any position to endorse the provision of those tests in primary schools. Agreed. Okay. Other than that, are members content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 166? Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, so that takes us on to item 8, the forward work programme. I'll ask the clerk to speak to that. Like maybe there have been sort of real-time changes coming through on that as we've been meeting, so I'll leave you to speak to that.
Okay, so the main one was that last one that we just mentioned, that the 2 sessions from the department on childcare and from NAHT on its early years paper have been confirmed. So we've got material in for right up to Easter, with some spaces for evidence sessions about legislation. So obviously the chair has already asked that members come back to me with any stakeholders that they would like to hear from about the committee bill, and similarly for GTC, please, if anyone wants to do that, we'll populate the rest of it. Yeah.
Probably worth noting on the committee bill, I think you left a note for me there. I was just reading during the meeting there, we've over 1,500 responses on the committee bill, so there's clearly the interest in the subject remains high. Danny?
No, it's just a wee small point where we don't have exact dates, but both myself and Pat's private members' bills are moving ahead. Hopefully we'll be moving them at some point in January, so we could be landing in the committee in around March maybe time. I'm just flagging it up just to see how that happens.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that and start scheduling that as well. We're going to get a Gantt chart that you can look at as well as the forward work plan, so that you can see the parallel processing of these various things, because we're going to have a lot.
Yeah, there will be a lot between now and summer. So like, I think we do also need to be realistic that I think, particularly given that update from yourself, Danny, on the two bills, you know, that there's not going to be a lot of scope for a huge amount of
I'm suggesting a deep dive into procurement, which maybe another
I
year or two in the
I think
mandate.
that might be for another time in another committee, but that's fine. I just wanted to flag one really small thing. It's we had agreed for the British Heart Foundation to come in to brief us, but I was just chatting with the clerk today. They, I think, had been keen to do that alongside the department, but I don't think the department are able to brief. So I had asked the clerk if members are all content, as DE were sort of saying that is more operational, to see if both EA in terms of the installation of the DFibs and SIA in terms of the curriculum element were able to brief. But you know, I think my understanding is February is Heart Health Month, and it would make sense to hear from them there. And committees had good engagement, so like hopefully we can still get that session over the line. Other than that, are members content to agree the forward work programme was drafted? Agreed. Item 9 is any other business. Is there any other business? No. And item 10 then is date, time and place of next meeting, and that is scheduled for Wednesday the 21st of January at 2 p.m, room 29 and online. And I'll put the question at this stage that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Agreed.